The cold November wind cut through Marcus Thompson's thin jacket like a knife. As he sat on the park bench at 7:30 p.m., his stomach growled loudly, reminding him that he hadn't eaten anything since yesterday morning. In his weathered hands, he held a small paper bag containing a sandwich and a bottle of water that someone from the local church had given him earlier. It was all the food he had for the day, maybe even for tomorrow. Before we dive in, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. Marcus had been living on the streets for almost 6 months now. He used to work as a construction worker, had a small apartment, and even managed to send some money to his sick mother every month. But when the economy got tough, his company laid off workers, and he was one of them. With no savings and bills piling up, he lost his apartment and ended up homeless. At 52 years old, finding another job proved harder than he ever imagined. As he was about to unwrap his sandwich, Marcus noticed an elderly couple sitting on another bench about 20 feet away. The old man was wearing a thin sweater that had seen better days, and his wife was shivering in her faded coat. They looked tired and hungry. Marcus watched as the woman opened her small purse and counted some coins, then shook her head sadly and closed it again. Something in their faces reminded Marcus of his own parents, who had passed away years ago. He remembered how his father used to skip meals sometimes so that Marcus and his siblings could eat when money was tight. The memory hit him hard, and he felt a strange pull in his heart. Without thinking too much about it, Marcus stood up and walked over to the couple. The old man looked up at him with cautious eyes. People usually crossed the street to avoid homeless people, so the man was surprised when Marcus approached with a gentle smile. "Excuse me, sir, ma'am," Marcus said softly. "I couldn't help but notice you both look cold and hungry. I have this sandwich and water bottle here. Would you like to have them?" The elderly woman, whose name was Helen Carter, looked at her husband Robert with wide eyes. They had been married for 48 years and had never been in such a difficult situation before. Robert had worked as a school janitor his whole life, and Helen had been a secretary at a small office. They lived on their small pension, but this month had been particularly hard. Their apartment rent had increased, and they had to choose between paying bills and buying food. "Oh no, we couldn't take your food," Helen said, her voice shaking slightly from both cold and emotion. "You need it more than we do." Marcus shook his head with a warm smile. "Please, I insist. I know what it feels like to be hungry and cold. My parents taught me that sharing is caring, and right now, I think you need this more than I do." Robert Carter looked at this homeless man, offering them his only meal, and felt tears forming in his eyes. He had lived long enough to know that true kindness was rare, especially when it came from someone who had so little to give. "Son, are you sure about this?" Robert asked, his voice filled with emotion. "Absolutely," Marcus replied, placing the bag on the bench between them. "My name is Marcus, and I believe that when we help each other, somehow things work out for everyone." Helen started crying softly as she accepted the food. "God bless you, Marcus. I'm Helen, and this is my husband, Robert. We will never forget your kindness." Marcus spent the next hour talking with the elderly couple. He learned that Robert had been looking for a part-time job to make ends meet, but at 71 years old, no one wanted to hire him. Helen had arthritis in her hands, which made it difficult for her to work. They had been sitting in the park because their apartment was too cold. They couldn't afford to keep the heating on all day. As it got later and colder, Marcus helped them find a warmer place to spend the evening. He knew about a 24-hour diner where the owner sometimes let homeless people sit for a few hours if they bought just a cup of coffee. Marcus used the few dollars he had in his pocket to buy Helen and Robert coffee and told them to stay warm. That night, Marcus went to sleep under a bridge, his stomach empty but his heart somehow feeling full. He had learned long ago that kindness didn't cost anything, and seeing the relief and gratitude on the elderly couple's faces made his own problems seem a little easier to bear. The next morning came with surprising warmth for November. Marcus was waking up at 8:15 a.m. when he heard someone calling his name. He looked up to see a well-dressed man in an expensive suit standing nearby. The man was tall, probably in his 50s, with kind eyes and graying hair. "Are you Marcus Thompson?" the man asked. Marcus was confused but nodded. "Yes, that's me. Do I know you?" The man smiled and extended his hand. "My name is William Harrison. I own Harrison Industries, and I've been looking for you since early this morning." Marcus shook his hand, still confused. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrison, but I think you have the wrong person. I don't know why someone like you would be looking for someone like me." William Harrison chuckled softly. "Oh, I have exactly the right person. You see, Marcus, Helen, and Robert Carter are my parents." Marcus's eyes widened in shock. He looked at this successful businessman and tried to connect him with the elderly couple he had helped the night before. "Your parents," Marcus repeated. "Yes," William continued. "Let me explain. My parents never told me how bad their financial situation had become. They were too proud to ask for help, even from their own son. You see, I've been so busy building my business over the years that I didn't pay enough attention to how they were doing. I thought their pension was enough, and they always said they were fine when I called." William paused and looked at Marcus with deep respect. "Last night, they came to my house at 10:45 p.m. They told me about what happened in the park, about how a homeless man gave them his only food. My mother was crying as she described your kindness. She said she had never met anyone so generous, someone who had so little but gave so much." Marcus felt overwhelmed by this information. "Mr. Harrison, I just did what felt right. They looked hungry and cold and I had food. It wasn't a big deal." "But it was a big deal, Marcus," William insisted. "It was the biggest deal in the world. You see, my parents were too ashamed to tell me they couldn't afford food. They were planning to go to bed hungry rather than ask for help. Your kindness not only fed them but also opened up an honest conversation between us for the first time in years." William reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. "Marcus, I want to offer you a job at my company. We need someone in our maintenance department, someone trustworthy and kind-hearted. The job comes with a good salary, health benefits, and I'll also help you find an apartment." Marcus stared at the envelope, unable to believe what was happening. "Mr. Harrison, I don't know what to say. Are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure about anything," William replied firmly. "You know, Marcus, I've been successful in business, but I had forgotten some of the most important lessons about life. Yesterday, you reminded my family what true generosity looks like. You showed us that kindness doesn't depend on how much money you have in your bank account." As Marcus opened the envelope, he found a job offer letter and a check for $5,000. William explained that the money was an advance on his salary to help him get back on his feet. "But there's more," William added with a smile. "My parents insisted on something. They want you to have dinner with our family every Sunday. Helen said she wants to cook for the man who took care of them when they needed it most." Over the following weeks, Marcus's life changed completely. He started working at Harrison Industries as a maintenance supervisor. His colleagues respected him for his work ethic and positive attitude. William had provided him with a nice apartment just 15 minutes away from work, and Marcus felt like he was living in a dream. Every Sunday, Marcus joined the Harrison family for dinner. Helen would cook his favorite meals, and Robert would tell stories about his younger days. Marcus became like an adopted son to them, and they treated him with the same love they showed their own children. But the story doesn't end there. Marcus never forgot where he came from or how it felt to be hungry and homeless. With his first paycheck, he bought food and warm clothes to give to other homeless people in the park where he used to sleep. Every week, he would spend his Saturday mornings helping at the local homeless shelter. William was so impressed by Marcus's continued generosity that he created a special program at his company called Second Chances. The program hired homeless individuals and people who had faced difficult times, giving them job training and support to rebuild their lives. Marcus became the program coordinator, helping dozens of people find work and hope. 3 months after that cold November night, the local newspaper wrote a story about Marcus and the Harrison family. The headline read, "One act of kindness creates ripple effect of hope." The article described how a homeless man's generous heart had not only changed his own life, but it also brought a family closer together and created opportunities for many other people in need. Marcus often thought about that night in the park. He realized that when he gave away his sandwich, he hadn't just shared food, he had shared hope. And somehow, that hope had come back to him multiplied many times over. The most beautiful part of the story happened 6 months later. Marcus had saved enough money to buy a small house. On the day he moved in, Helen and Robert helped him pack his belongings. As they were finishing up, Helen handed Marcus a framed photo. "What's this?" Marcus asked, looking at the picture of himself with the elderly couple. "Robert took this picture with his old camera on the night we met you in the park," Helen explained with tears in her eyes. "I want you to have it to remember that kindness always finds its way back to the person who gives it." Marcus hung the picture in his living room, where it served as a daily reminder that no matter how difficult life gets, there's always room for kindness. He learned that sometimes the smallest actions can lead to the biggest changes, and that helping others is really just another way of helping yourself. Years later, when people asked Marcus about his success story, he would always say the same thing. "I thought I was just sharing a sandwich, but I was actually sharing hope. And hope, unlike food, grows bigger when you give it away." The Harrison family business continued to grow, and their Second Chances program became a model for other companies across the country. Marcus eventually became a vice president at the company, but he never stopped visiting the park where his life changed, always carrying extra sandwiches for anyone who might need them. And every November, on the anniversary of that cold night, the entire Harrison family would gather in that same park to hand out food and warm clothes to homeless individuals, continuing the cycle of kindness that Marcus had started with one simple act of generosity.